The last time I reviewed an Arcam product, they had just unveiled their FMJ line of products. And if you're trying to do the math in your head, let me save you some trouble. That was 22 years ago. But after only 4 years of persistent requests, the Arcam drought is finally over. Wow, and have things changed. The old matte white and gray design of old has been completely replaced with a new matte black facade with hints of yellow, a color combo I haven't seen on a hi-fi product before, at least not one that wasn't co-branded by McLaren or Lamborghini. The A25 integrated amp is part of the Radius series that Arcam launched last year. The A25 is the most powerful of the 3 amps in the series, with 100 watts per channel into 8 ohms and 165 watts in 4. Unlike the smaller Radia amps, the A25 uses a Class G amplifier design, not to be confused with Class D. Class G is actually closer to Class AB, only the G is more efficient. Think of it this way. If Class A, and maybe even Class AB, is a V8 muscle car, then a Class G amp is more of a hybrid. Only in this case, Class G uses multiple power supplies to generate the power to drive your loudspeakers properly, but it uses them on an as-needed basis. Now, in contrast, Class A takes more of a call it Highlander approach by using only one power supply. This means that at lower volumes, the A25 is going to sip power, whereas a Class A amp is essentially on full tilt all of the time, even at idle. As far as inputs go, the Arcam has both analog and digital inputs along with a built-in DAC. The ESS Sabre DAC, specifically the ES9280A Pro, accepts high-res digital signals from the amp's coaxial digital inputs, its single optical, or its USB input. There's support for Bluetooth with aptX for convenience with mobile devices and Bluetooth-enabled headphones. What it doesn't have is an HDMI input, which is a miss. And before you hit the comments about the new Radia amps from Arcam, don't worry, I'm going to get to that. On the analog side, you'll find 3 RCA-style inputs, a dedicated moving magnet phono preamp built in, and a single pair of unbalanced preamp outs for use with either a third-party amplifier for more power or a subwoofer. As for internal bass management, there is none, so your subwoofer will need to be adjusted manually for things like crossover, phase, and level. Despite having Bluetooth connectivity, the A25 is not a smart integrated amplifier, meaning it has no additional wireless connectivity or control, which also means there's no internal streaming, a smartphone app, or smart home support. Purists will no doubt revel in these omissions, while others, like myself, will raise an eyebrow and ask, why? On the plus side, the A25's almost total lack of features means it's really easy to set up and integrate into a stereo system. I connected the Arcam to our 98-inch Sony TV using an optical cable. This let me continue to use our Apple TV 4K for streaming music and movies. I also connected Arcam's standalone streamer, the ST5, and I tested the Arcam's built-in phono preamp with our reference turntable, the Audio-Technica LP140XP fitted with our Ortofon LVB cartridge, which proved to be a really good fit. If you're wondering what speakers this 100 watt per channel amp can power, let me just say, I haven't found a bad match yet. We have literally tested every speaker we have just so I could find the A25's breaking point. Not even the huge and massively expensive Bowers & Wilkins 801 signatures caused the A25 to trip up or worse, cry uncle. In fact, it's one of my favorite pairings. It got a little warm, sure, but it never threw in the towel. For a more realistic pairing, though, our reference SVS Titans and surprise, the Wharfedale Super Dentons and KEF R3 Metas also took a turn with the A25, and I had zero complaints with any of those. The first thing I did once the A25 was hooked up to the Titans, I hit play on Moby's Everloving, a demo track that I have used for 25 years. And the first note I made was mad Mark Levinson vibes. I have owned several Mark Levinson amplifiers, including the number 432, 433, and the reference 53 monos. The A25 took me right back to their sound. I'm not saying the Arcam is the same as a Mark Levinson amplifier or that they even share similar topology. They aren't and they don't. But the sound is very reminiscent of what I loved about my old Levinson amps. The A25 is mostly neutral, with just a hint of low mid-range or mid-bass weight and a very subtle roll-off in the highs. In my experience, it slots right between Harman's Drive Chord Tech and Levinson, offering a bit more resolution and detail rendering compared to the Crown amps, but not quite rising entirely to the effortlessness of Levinson's fidelity. The A25 brilliantly controls even difficult-to-drive speakers with large woofers like those found on the 801s and the Titans. They were no problem for the Arcam. Bass was always well dampened, controlled, and full of appreciable detail, something I noted while listening to some of my favorite tracks from Bush, Dave Matthews Band, as well as Crystal Method. The A25's mid-range performance is neutral in tone. However, compared to the costlier Yamaha 2000A, the Arcam has a little bit more weight and presence, giving singer-songwriters more physical dimension, which I didn't expect. Don't get me wrong, the Yamaha is no slouch. It sounds great. But I preferred the Arcam when it came to vocals, especially female vocalists such as Diana Krall, Beth Hart, or relative newcomer Sabrina Carpenter. As for the highs, the A25 is an amp that you can just listen to all day. Maybe it's not the most extended. It definitely didn't sound or feel like it could stretch quite as far out as the Primera combo we just reviewed, and it was nowhere near as revealing or ruthless as the Eversolo A8 F2 combo, but in a lot of ways, I actually think this is a plus. To be clear, I don't think that if you were to put this amp on an AP that its response would show a curbing of the highs. It's more of a feeling that I'm trying to describe. This is not a bright, etched, or fatiguing sound. There's enough top-end detail, air, and decay that metallic instruments still sound metallic and true to life. What you don't get is an over-the-top brilliance that accentuates sibilance or that can become fatiguing, something we've noted in several of our recent Class D reviews. Moving on to soundstage and dynamics. I think amps sometimes get a little bit too much credit when it comes to a speaker's soundstage reproduction. And I say this because a good soundstage is the result of a balancing act between your speaker's position in the room and their position relative to you, as just well as their design, specifically their dispersion or lack thereof. I believe this often misattributed credit has to do with control and dynamics. When a speaker is powered or driven properly, the sound will feel effortless. You're not really going to notice any one aspect of the sound get louder or softer as you adjust the volume. Everything will simply scale appropriately. And when this happens, you may feel you're hearing a more nuanced or layered sound than what you're used to. But is this really entirely the amp's doing? Well, to a degree, I suppose, but it's not as if the amp is changing the speaker's ability or fixing your poor setup. What's more likely is the amp is simply driving your speakers more efficiently. So rather than hear strain or worse, distortion, you hear the same performance and level of appreciable detail at all volumes. This is something the A25 gets bang on. In layman's terms, if your speakers are capable of wide open detailed stages with explosive dynamics, the A25 isn't going to rob them of their capabilities. So as far as sound quality is concerned, I think the A25 is pretty darn great, but some of the decisions that Arcam has made are kind of confusing. HDMI is something that I've advocated for years now, and I get that some people still don't understand the benefits of having it in a hi-fi component, which allows manufacturers to continue to leave it off products and put more profit into their bank account. And while I'd call Arcam's lack of smart tech more or less a wash, the lack of basic adjustments like tone controls, that's a head scratcher. I mean, they give you balance, though accessing it is not really all that intuitive, but leaving off bass and treble tone controls, that's just petty. Seriously, what's that about? Now, and I know this is entirely subjective, but the bold decision to go with the yellow accent doesn't exactly fit within most hi-fi design schemes. Perhaps the A25 would look more at home next to, say, Klipsch's not-so-popular McLaren-branded speakers, but I don't think that's the speaker duo Arcam was hoping I would mention, given that their parent company, Harman, also owns JBL and Revel. On a more utilitarian level, while the decorative flap that hangs over the back panel does help to conceal some cable clutter, it makes connecting cables to the amp next to impossible, especially if you're leaning over the top of the amp to do it. Form over function, I guess. And before I jump into comparisons, no doubt you've noticed, I mentioned the ST5 streamer earlier. Real quick word on that. Obviously, the streamer is a perfect visual match for the A25, and it brings many of your favorite streaming platforms to the Radia series, as well as features like AirPlay and Chromecast. But unless you're a stickler for having matchy-matchy components, I would skip it. The features and support for various streaming services are pretty limited. Its best feature is internet radio, but that's a lot of money to spend for internet radio. The new ARCAM app, it borders on unusable. It loses connection with the ST5 frequently, and sometimes you even need to factory reset the streamer in order for the app to work again. So for $800, you can do a lot better. Even a WIM Pro is gonna absolutely smoke the ST5. But getting on with comparisons, if you're considering the ARCAM A25, you may also want to cross-shop the AUDIOLAB 7000A. Both integrated amps have a minimalist style that costs around $1,500. The 7000A has an HDMI port, yes, but it comes with a little less power. I love the 7000A, but I prefer the sound of the ARCAM in this head-to-head. The two amps have a similar tone, but the ARCAM sounds more confident, and it just exhibits greater control over difficult-to-drive speakers. If good sound quality and features are an absolute must, the ARCAM does not compete with either the Yamaha 1000A or its more expensive brother, the 2000A. While I preferred the sound, again, of the A25, both Yamaha integrateds are a lot easier to live with day to day, and they allow for more flexibility in user control compared to the ARCAM. But the A25's biggest competition comes from inside its own house. At launch, the A25 was likely a showstopper. I know had we gotten one around Christmas time, it would have been a contender for Amplifier of the Year. But ARCAM just announced new Radia integrated amplifiers at Munich, and these have built-in streaming, high-res displays, smart home tech, HDMI, and more power. All of the things the A25 should have had at launch, but didn't, which is no doubt why so many ARCAM faithful saw the current Radia series as more of a rebadge than something entirely new. I can't really comment if they're right or wrong, because remember, anything from ARCAM at this point is new to me. I guess chalk it up to bad timing in sending out our review samples. After all, it only took 4 years, and Christie's asking to get an ARCAM in-house. But I love the A25 sound, especially paired with our SVS Titans, and I had every intention of buying it as a reference. But considering what's coming just over the horizon and how the new SA35 or SA45 will give me everything I want in the A25 and then some, I'm gonna wait. If the new SA models perform and sound as good as the A25, well, giving me all the features and controls that I want and will use day to day, I think the future is super bright for ARCAM's Radia series, at least in this house. So that's it. That is my review of ARCAM's newish A25 integrated amp. What do you guys think? What do you think? What do you think of my decision to wait? Is the A25 exactly what you want in an integrated, or were you like me? You saw all these new announcements and you're like, they should have just did that. Let me know down in the comments. I'm sure it's going to be a really great discussion. And you never know, some of your questions or comments may end up in our follow-up Unplugged, where you're going to hear Christie's thoughts on this pretty cool little integrated. Until then, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead, ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links Christie's left for you down below, know that that is a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here. And both of us, thank you very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for me today. I got to get out of here. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. See you on Friday. Till then, take care.